July 27th, 2023. A young porter lay dying near the summit of K2's brutal mountain. He had no gloves, no proper suit, no oxygen, and he wasn't even listed on the official permit. As Muhammad Hassan collapsed at the Bottleneck, one of the deadliest choke points on Earth, climbers stepped over him, chasing their summit dreams while he slowly froze to death. His death wasn't just tragic, it was a haunting black mark in the history of climbing, a moment that forced the mountaineering world to ask what it had become. But in 2025, everything is different. The rules, the gear, the ethics, and the way the world watches every step. From paragliders launching off the summit, to government crackdowns, to climate chaos, climbing K2 won't be the same after 2025. Welcome to the extreme edge. In the realm of extreme mountaineering, one mountain stands above almost all others, whispered with a mix of awe and dread. K2. It is the world's second highest peak, rising to a height of 28,251 feet above sea level, in the Karakoram Range on the China-Pakistan border. Yet, its reputation for brutality often overshadows its slightly taller sibling, Everest. Known in the climbing world as the Savage Mountain, K2 presents an unparalleled challenge, where human ambition clashes with nature's raw, unforgiving power. K2's slopes are notorious for their technical difficulty, including extremely dangerous sections like the Black Pyramid and the infamous Bottleneck, which demand extreme skill and resilience from climbers. But the most terrifying part is that K2 has a startling fatality rate, with climbers dying during their descent. As many as 37% of people die on the mountain on the way down, which is significantly higher than the 27% on Everest. But what compels individuals to take on such a formidable mountain, risking life and limb on its treacherous slopes? For some, it is the ultimate personal test, a quest to push the boundaries of human endurance against a peak often considered the holy grail of climbing. For others, like the indigenous peoples of the mountains, it embodies a profound sense of national pride, a mission to hoist their flag atop a summit that represents the pinnacle of mountaineering achievement. Whatever the motivation behind undertaking such a daring adventure, this infamous mountain draws climbers from around the world year after year. In 2024, it's estimated that as many as 175 permits were issued for K2. The media reported that between 50 and 65 people managed to reach the summit. However, the exact number of both permits and summits is uncertain, as, unlike Nepal's Ministry of Tourism, the Pakistan government does not issue reports. For the most part, expeditions to the summit of this mountain follow a general pattern. If you want to become one of the few climbers to reach the towering peaks of K2, to start, you'll need to pay several $1,000s for their permit. Once that's done, and you buy all the personal gear you need, it's time to pack your bags and head to the airport. From there, you'll fly into Skardu, Pakistan, which serves as the gateway to the breathtaking Karakoram mountain range. Then, after a relatively long and bumpy bus ride to Askol, you'll begin a challenging week-long trek to base camp. Already exhausted from the journey, this is where the real fun and danger begins. You'll spend weeks carrying supplies to higher camps and fixing ropes to aid in the final ascent, acclimating yourself in the process. You'll face blistering winds, heavy snowfall, and the risk of disappearing down a crevasse, never to be seen again. But if you play your cards right, after weeks of agonizing climbing and plummeting temperatures, the skies will open and you'll make your way to the top of the second tallest summit in the world. For many, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and worth the risk. However, not everyone reaches the summit of this mountain and lives to tell the tale. For many, it was the last peak they ever climbed. On July 27, 2023, 27-year-old Pakistani porter Muhammad Hassan was part of a team on K2, hired by the popular tour operator Leela Peak Expeditions. One of Muhammad's jobs involved installing ropes as fixed safety lines for the climbers on the expedition. But this is no easy task. Each fixing had to be carefully set into place. All the while, he battled against the plummeting temperatures, heavy winds, and dangerous terrain, which, at any minute, could leave him falling down the mountain. But this wasn't the only danger he faced. You see, this was Muhammad's first time working on an 8,000er, which is a mountaineering term that means a peak higher than 8,000 meters. Despite spending considerable time as a low-altitude porter on K2 and Spontic, this expedition was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Everything was far more intense, from the climbing to the unpredictable weather, and soon he would face the brutality of the mountain head-on. Tiny detour on this chaos train. If you want more raw, uncut stories we can't show here, come join the Extreme community on Patreon. We'll see you on the real Extreme Edge. On the night of July 27th, Muhammad was carrying ropes for the Sherpa team. At around 26,900 feet above sea level, he slipped and fell over 20 feet down a steep snow slope, becoming entangled in the fixed ropes. He yelled out in agony as the whip of the ropes snapped his legs. He began crying for help as he dangled uncontrollably upside down, swaying from side to side. It's difficult to imagine the level of fear that would come over someone in such a terrifying situation. With each passing moment, the risk of hypothermia increased, and the young porter's life was now in danger. Sherpas quickly rushed to his aid and tried to pull him back up, but even with several people pulling on the rope, it was not possible. Then, the unimaginable happened. Allegedly, the Sherpas gave up and turned their back on Muhammad, leaving him dangling upside down in unimaginable pain as they continued with the rope-fixing work. But the worst part, no help was coming. Several other expeditions were on the mountain that day and were forced to step over Muhammad's now severely weakened body. His terrifying cries soon turned to faint mumbles, and before long, he fell silent. As climbers continued to push for the summit, many were forced to look on as Muhammad dangled over the edge of the infamous Bottleneck. One of them was Kristin Harila, a Norwegian northern Sami mountaineer and former cross-country skier. She was part of a large expedition on this fateful day. Her recollection of the story would later send chills down the spine of listeners as she described the events that occurred. As her team pushed for the summit, they saw Muhammad dangling 16 feet down the Bottleneck upside down. He was without a downsuit, had no oxygen, and his stomach was bare. He was exposed to the plummeting temperatures and blistering winds. Kristin claims that when they saw the severity of the situation, they tried their best to help the porter, even going as far as to risk their own lives. One Sherpa with her team clipped their rope to the team and slowly lowered themselves down to Muhammad in an attempt to turn him around. At this point, it was clear the porter's legs were broken. He was unresponsive, and he was freezing to death. Kristin and her team desperately tried to help the porter, and eventually, after over an hour, they managed to turn Muhammad and supply him with oxygen and warm water. If they were going to attempt to save his life, they needed to act quickly, but time was against them, and moments later, a series of unfortunate events would force Kristin's team to split up. News of an avalanche and a problem with the fixing team led Kristin and the Sherpas to continue along the trail, while their cameraman, Gabriel Tarso, remained behind with Muhammad for hours, sharing his oxygen and risking his own life. Eventually, he managed to make a pulling system with 3 anchors and a rope. He and Muhammad's friend used what energy they had left to pull him up little by little, eventually bringing him to rest on a small ice shelf. They fed him warm water and tried anything they could to warm his numb body, but supplying Muhammad with oxygen quickly drained his own reserves, and he was forced to leave and join the others on their push to the summit. Here, another climber gave Gabriel another bottle of oxygen, but by the time they all returned to the Bottleneck, it was too late, and Muhammad had sadly passed. From the moment they laid eyes on Muhammad, however, the team knew deep down there was nothing they could have done. As his legs were broken, he needed to be carried. But Kristin pointed out in an interview, you need 4 to 6 people to carry a person down, especially in dangerous areas. However, the Bottleneck is so narrow that you can only fit 1 person in front and 1 behind the person being helped. In this case, it was impossible to safely carry Hassan down without risking more lives. Others who witnessed the event strongly criticized the lack of a rescue mission. They suggested that if a Westerner had been in Muhammad's place, a more vigorous rescue operation would have been launched. But how? All of this was climbers helping each other. They had no authority to rely on, no chances to call for rescue missions. The treacherous location of the incident made it all but impossible for a rescue team or helicopter to reach Muhammad, leaving them with no option but to leave him to die. But what do you think? Considering the danger of the tight bottleneck, would you leave someone to die alone on the mountain? Or would you remain behind and try to organize some form of rescue? After a thorough investigation by the Gilgit-Baltistan government, the regulatory body responsible for overseeing mountaineering activities in the region, into the porter's death, they concluded that Lila Peak expeditions had violated multiple regulations, including not providing proper gear to Hassan, hiring an inexperienced high-altitude porter, and lacking required insurance. In simple terms, they were, in part, responsible for the young porter's death. He was employed to climb one of the world's highest and most dangerous mountains without proper gear, such as a down suit, gloves, and supplemental oxygen. Yet, despite the total lack of care for Muhammad's life, the tour group was slapped with a 2-year ban from operating on K2. Many deem this too light a punishment. Muhammad's tragic death has spurred a series of recommendations aimed at improving the safety of porters. These changes, along with other upcoming regulations, are set to transform the K2 experience, leading many in the climbing community to propose that after 2025, things will never be the same on the mountain. In the wake of the porter's death, it highlighted just how dangerous the job can be. You see, the life of a porter is not easy. They carry heavy loads of supplies up and down the mountain, set up ropes along dangerous trails, and undoubtedly risk their lives each and every day they go to work. While some climbers might face the bottleneck of K2 3 or 4 times, a porter like Muhammad can do this dozens of times in a single season. Unfortunately, many in the climbing community agree that they're unfairly compensated for their dangerous work. High-altitude porters on K2 expeditions, especially those working in Pakistan, are often paid significantly less than Sherpas in Nepal, despite the challenging conditions and high altitudes. A 3-week rate for a low-altitude porter on K2 might be as low as $55, with no consistent rate for high-altitude porters. While some companies supplement these wages or collect additional tips from clients, many consider the standard rates too low. Could you imagine risking your life carrying back-breaking loads up some of the most dangerous terrain on Earth for as little as a few coffees and pastries from Starbucks? But for many porters, this is their everyday reality. Muhammad's death has had a rippling effect on some of the changes climbers will soon witness on K2. It not only highlighted the necessity for better care for porters, but also just how dangerous their jobs are. The Pakistani government's report on the incident highlighted several issues, including the lack of proper gear, training, and insurance for high-altitude porters, or HAPs. This led to the establishment of new laws that included mandatory insurance coverage for people like Muhammad. But not only will HAPs be covered, reports suggest insurance must be provided for guides, cooks, kitchen boys, and low-altitude porters, per the new government laws. For many seeking to climb K2, the cost of this insurance is included in the overall package price for the expeditions through groups such as Makalu Extreme Treks and Expeditions. This is a major turning point for porters and will ensure they receive the proper financial protection for not only themselves, but also their families should something happen to them while they're on the mountain. The risk of injury or death is significant, and medical evacuation can be extremely costly. For instance, a helicopter evacuation in Pakistan can cost as much as $25,000. So by receiving insurance, porters gain access not only to financial protection in case they're seriously injured or worse, but also to emergency medical evacuation services. But that's not all the authorities are doing to ensure climber safety. In a crackdown on regulations, officials have announced that any tourist group that fails to follow the rules, such as not providing insurance or proper gear to their support staff, could face severe penalties. These could range from hefty fines to suspension of climbing permits. This strict enforcement could be in response to the backlash received in the wake of Muhammad's unfortunate death. As we mentioned previously in the video, the Gilgit-Baltistan government issued Lila Peak expeditions with a 2-year ban for not providing Muhammad with adequate equipment, which ultimately played a role in his death. This was a major blow for the Skardu-based company run by brothers Anwar and Akbar Syed, as all of Pakistan's 8,000ers lie within Gilgit-Baltistan. But more so, it served as a chilling warning to any other outfitter who is currently not taking the welfare of their employees into account. These are just 2 of several more changes coming to K2 in the coming years. But none will affect tourism and climbers themselves, quite like the new prices set to hit the mountain this year. Like many of the world's most sought-after summits, K2 is under the jurisdiction of a government. The Gilgit-Baltistan government of Pakistan grants permits for climbing K2 from the southern side. Meanwhile, the Chinese government, through its authorities in Xinjiang, grants permits for the northern side of K2. The most popular route up the mountain is the Abruzzi Ridge, located on the southern face of the mountain, on the Pakistani side. This is where the majority of K2 climbs originate and where most seek to obtain a permit. In 2025, the Gilgit-Baltistan government left the climbing community shocked after announcing a significant increase in permit fees. In years prior, climbers could apply for a group permit that covered up to 7 climbers for around $12,000. Each additional climber in the expedition would cost another $3,000. But much to the disappointment of climbers, this is all set to change, and they will have to pay considerably more to reach the summit of this infamous mountain. The Gilgit-Baltistan authorities have gotten rid of the collective fee and established an individual royalty of $5,000 per climber. A group of 7 climbers that paid $12,000 this year will, therefore, pay $35,000 in 2025. That's nearly a 200% increase. The news didn't sit well with guides whose livelihood depends on tourism. According to Ali Porikh of Jasmine Tours, this is not good for promoting adventure tourism in Pakistan. Mingma Ji Sherpa, owner of Imagine Nepal, also expressed his concerns on social media, stating that this year the number of climbers in Pakistan dropped, and it will definitely be less next year if the new prices are confirmed. He further added, "We have our reservations for next year, but it could be our last season in Pakistan." Just like that, the Pakistani government could single-handedly reduce the number of climbers coming to the country each year due to the drastic increase in permit prices. It all came to a head this year when many of the local tourist outfitters took the case before the chief court of Gilgit-Baltistan. But when the tribunal placed the price increase on hold, the Pakistani government decided it would delay issuing any new permits. At this point, the disagreement between the officials and outfitters had turned into an old-fashioned standoff. It has since turned into a nightmare for tourists on the ground who had prematurely flown to Pakistan in hopes of obtaining a permit. On March 26th, Dawn reported that, quote, over 200 foreign trekkers and mountaineers through their tour operators have already applied for trekking and mountaineering in Gilgit-Baltistan, but the tourism department has not issued permits. Essentially, tourists became stranded as the tour companies lacked the permits required for trekking and climbing mountains like K2. In the end, many were forced to return back home without ever seeing any of the breathtaking views they were promised. Could you imagine spending thousands of dollars on flights, accommodations, and flying thousands of miles across the world, only to be told you can't climb K2 because the government won't issue a permit? The ongoing war between tour operators and Pakistani officials is taking its toll on those wishing to climb K2, and many have opted to venture elsewhere. However, there's a glimmer of hope. Unofficial estimates suggest prices may drop to around $3,000 per person. But you might be asking, why would a government that was already charging at least $12,000 per expedition want to increase this price further? Officials claim the increase aims to offset costs related to environmental degradation, waste management, and potentially reflect the true cost of climbing this challenging mountain. A key factor was the introduction of a waste management fee in 2023, specifically targeting the environmental impact of climbing expeditions. So, While these are credible reasons, the question remains, did the price need to increase by nearly 200% to cover these costs? Many climbers and outfitters argue no, but the drastic price increase is just the beginning of the changes. Perhaps the most unique thing we climbers are set to experience in the coming years is high-speed internet on the mountain. Yes, you heard that right. There's a chance that climbers at not only base camp but also high-altitude locations might be able to share a live feed of their expedition. And it's all thanks to Elon Musk's popular satellite internet provider, Starlink. For years, the Pakistani government had restrictions on Starlink, preventing its use in the country. However, in March 2025, an agreement was reached, opening up the possibility of high-speed internet even in the most remote parts of the nation. This includes areas like K2, where climbers can access high-speed internet tens of thousands of feet above sea level. If the expedition team brings along one of the relatively light satellites and a power source. Several K2 expeditions have already tried to use Starlink technology for communication, including those organized by Mountain Professionals and Imagine Nepal back in 2023. They had hoped this would allow teams to stay in touch with base camp and receive real-time weather updates, crucial for safety and planning during climbs. But unfortunately, at this time, the Pakistani government had disabled the use of Starlink in the country, and the trial ultimately failed. But with the 2025 deal, there's hope that the use of satellite internet on top of K2 could potentially revolutionize the climbing world, opening up new possibilities and enhancing the overall experience. Hopefully, that helps climbers check the avalanche forecast and have a safer experience on K2. K2 is widely regarded as one of the most dangerous mountains in the world, and every year, dozens of people find themselves in life-threatening situations. But with Starlink, which utilizes an internet router that can be set up anywhere, it offers climbers the ability to send distress signals or call for help via satellite communication. However, others are looking at it as a way to promote the sport. Climbers will be able to share their experiences live through social media or blogs while on the mountain. We may enter into a new era of climbing where we receive daily vlogs from climbers as they make their way up the challenging and unpredictable terrain of K2, offering raw footage of the full expedition in real time. The options are limitless, and the availability of Starlink on K2 represents a transformative step forward for high-altitude climbing expeditions, enhancing safety, communication, and overall expedition management. If you're surprised by the use of Starlink on K2, wait till you hear about the next major change that's set to arrive in the coming years. This might totally revolutionize how climbers make their way down the mountain. If you're a regular viewer of the channel, you're familiar with the dangers of the descent, the exhaustion from the climb, the mental and physical strain of walking downhill, the treacherous terrain, and the constant threat of falls, all combine to create a perilous situation. But what if there was a way to avoid all of this? What if climbers could simply soar off the mountain? Well, this is close to becoming a reality, but maybe not in the way you think. Paragliding from the summit of K2 has become a highly debated topic among climbers and adventure seekers. Back in 2024, Jean-Yves Frederiksen, also known as Blutch, successfully reached the summit of the mountain and then launched himself from the peak to the ground below using a paraglider. The flight down must have been like something from a movie. As Jean slowly descended back to Earth, his line of sight would have been filled with breathtaking 360-degree views of the surrounding Karakoram Range, including snow-capped mountains, glaciers, and a panoramic view of the rugged landscape wedged between China and Pakistan. Jean held a special place in his heart for his paraglider, which he often refers to as his rope and backup. In one interview, he said, "With it on my back, I am sure that if anything happens, I can always escape and fly back down." Jean was one of 4 French climbers who summited K2 on July 28, 2024, without using oxygen. But they made headlines for another reason. Jean, alongside Benjamin Vedrine, Liv Sansos, and Zeb Roche, made history by being the first people to paraglide from the top of the mountain successfully. But their impressive achievement once again raised the question in the mountaineering world: could it be employed in times of need? The most obvious advantage of paragliding from the summit is its potential to serve as a life-saving measure in emergencies. Climbing K2 is a dangerous undertaking, with the constant threat of accidents or injuries. In such dangerous situations, paragliding could be the difference between life and death. For example, if a climber is injured or suffering from severe altitude sickness, paragliding offers a swift means of evacuation. This is particularly crucial on K2, where the rugged terrain and harsh weather conditions can make rescue operations extremely challenging. Moreover, paragliding from the summit can also reduce the risk of exhaustion and fatigue-related accidents during the descent. Climbing K2 is an extremely physically demanding task, and, as we previously mentioned, the descent can be just as challenging. By paragliding from the summit, climbers can conserve energy and reduce their exposure to potential hazards. However, paragliding from K2's summit is not without its own risks. The high altitude and unpredictable weather conditions make it a highly challenging and technical activity. Climbers must have extensive experience and training in both mountaineering and paragliding to attempt such a feat. Don't be surprised if we start to see more and more people paragliding from the summit of K2 as an alternative means of descent during emergencies. Changes like these are only natural as mountaineering continues to increase in popularity. More often than not, the climbing community plays a significant role in ushering in new regulations, but the authorities also play their part in ensuring the safety of not only tourists, but everyone who uses the mountain. What the future of K2 holds is uncertain. However, it's clear that things are set to change drastically in the years to come. From more expensive permits to live streams using Starlink and the potential to paraglide from this summer, I think it's safe to say that after 2025, climbing K2 could be an entirely new experience. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay bold and live brave.